What is the attention the space race is receiving in Washington?
Well, of course, everyone is riveted, just like the rest of us all over the country and frankly all over the world. Seeing the privatization of space has been fascinating. It also means that, of course, Congress is a little bit behind. That is what you see when people take a while to catch on to things. The privatization of any industry takes Congress a bit of time to catch up when it comes to things like regulation. But you've also seen a marked shift in how Congress prioritizes space exploration. This was something that for such a long time, Kristen, was just an inherent, frankly, patriotic identity that we shared as Americans. The idea that we were going to explore the uncharted frontiers, that we were going to go where no human has ever gone before, and sent people to the moon, in fact, not just once, but multiple times. And then it all kind of died down a little bit. The next project that we sort of did as an international community was, of course, the International Space Station, which is sort of closing its time up there in orbit. It was sent up to service satellites, which is something that is still needed, but not needed at the same extent, and certainly not the cost. And you see that Democrats in particular, who've previously been friendly to space exploration, they don't want to fund as much of it. Republicans, on the other hand, want to fund a lot of space exploration. There's no real reason for that unless you look at sort of the areas where there is a lot of space exploration and space industry. Places like, of course, Florida's Space Coast, Huntsville, Alabama, and the surrounding area, Houston, and a large part of Texas. In fact, this launched this week happening in Texas as well, Kristen. So this is where you start to see that lawmakers in those areas push more and more and more for money for NASA, for money for those jobs to keep them in their communities. That makes sense, right? Of course it does. Now, when it comes to the responses we've seen so far, because we do have one of these two billionaires who has gone to space already, it's been a bit mixed. People are thrilled to see that we have sort of pushed the bounds of what we're able to do as humans, but it also means that some people who've been more critical of the existence of billionaires, people like Senator Bernie Sanders, are of course not as keen on the idea. So I want you to take a look at this tweet that the senator from Vermont sent out the day that Branson took his space flight, and he said this, quote, "Here on Earth, in the richest country on the planet, half our people live paycheck to paycheck. People are struggling to feed themselves, struggling to see a doctor, but hey, the richest guys in the world are off in outer space. Yes, it's time to tax the billionaires." So, hey, if you're going to spend a lot of money on sending yourself to space, you may get a big tax bill while Democrats control Congress. But luckily, there are checks and balances even within the party, Kristen. So I don't think that Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson need to worry about that quite yet.
We'll see if that does become a concern down the road, Megan. I know the Space Force established during the Trump administration. What is President Biden's view on the newest branch of the military?
There was an idea, Kristen, that Space Force would just sort of be disbanded when Biden came in, or it wouldn't be funded, or it would just sort of fade into oblivion, as though the former president did not create an entire branch of the military with the approval of Congress. He did. And even though for many people it felt like a bit of a joke, or certainly was covered by the media as a bit of a joke, it's a very real branch of the military. And at this point, it's clear that President Biden supports it. We heard from General Mark Milley in that famous viral comment when he was discussing critical race theory. He actually, in that same comment, in that same testimony, referred to soldiers, airmen, seamen, Marines, and guardians. Those, of course, are the names of the Space Force officers and Space Force enlisted personnel. The Space Force has about 6,000 employees at this point. It's mostly focused on servicing satellites, which is something that's obviously a very big part of our space exploration and clearing space debris. But there's an idea that the next militarization in the world may happen in space as we sort of enhance technology, Kristen. And so that's why you start to see that there's definitely this idea that Space Force may be more necessary than it seemed when Space Force was a punchline of a joke. In fact, just the other day, when President Biden was addressing the nation as commander-in-chief, specifically the flags behind him representing every branch, he included a Space Force flag. He's also asked for $2.2 billion in his upcoming fiscal budget for Space Force. So he's not letting it go anywhere anytime soon. Still a very, very small part of the military, though. The overall budget, $700 billion. 2.2 doesn't even scratch the surface of that, Kristen. But it goes to show that space is still an incredibly important initiative, not just for lawmakers and jobs, but also for national security here in Washington.